Welcome back to Bunker Basics, where we answer completely fake questions from the AI, but pretend they're real for the sake of content. None of this medical, dental, vision, legal, financial, veterinary, or any advice about anything. Do your own research, stop it! All up in an abandoned bunker. Let's go! I said, let's go! It's time for Bunker Basics. We're going to answer fake questions. So get your drinks and sandwiches. Now let's hear it for the host. Wait, what? Just kidding, it's time for a drop. What? This mine and this mine and this mine. Okay, now time for the host, Chance Paladin.
This one's firearms related. There is my co-host, Ringo the cat. Okay, this one's firearms related. We're going to see how we do. Hey, all you firearms instructors, responsible gun owners, and myth-busting shooters, -- I'm a total prepper newbie who's thinking about adding a firearm for home defense and possible harder times, but I'm bombarded with conflicting quote-unquote facts, Hollywood nonsense, and forum scare stories. Help me understand the real safety and practical truths from the common myths and urban legends so I can make smart, informed decisions! ! Question 1. I have situation. I keep hearing that handguns are useless for self-defense because they lack quote-unquote stopping power compared to rifles or shotguns. Is it true that pistols are basically ineffective for stopping a threat, or is that an overhyped myth? Stopping power skeptic Steve. Handguns aren't useless for self-defense because they lack stopping power, although they do lack stopping power. They're useless for self-defense because they suck for accuracy outside of 10 yards unless you absolutely practice your ass off and are using, a 4-inch barrel versus or slide versus a 3.3-inch subcompact. So you have to, people say 380 sucks for self-defense. People say 9mm sucks for self-defense, but there's comparable 380 defensive rounds now. And there's very, very effective 9mm defense rounds, but you'll still see police mag dumping and the perp not stopping, or mag dumping and just completely missing. And then reloading and then shenanigans. So, truthfully, what people will say is that a pistol is for trying to get your way to your rifle. That's the reality of the situation, is pistols are a compromise. People say, carry 40. No, 40 is very questionable. 45 decent, but you're losing capacity. And then 10 mil, if you're in bear country and still want a modern firearm. And then everything bigger than that, I talk about 44 mag, for bigger bear country. But if we're talking about the two leggers, people will try to tell you, oh, if you need more than 6 rounds, you just can't. I haven't read these yet, so I don't know if we get into that. But you just can't aim well enough. Well, home invasions now are like 3 to 5 people, so a revolver is just not practical. 2 revolvers isn't practical. There's so many stories about that, or just watch literally any video out of Brazil where they're not allowed to have modern handguns, and you can see the shortfalls of revolvers where people would have survived and been fine if they'd had a modern pistol. So, stopping power comes from speed, which pistols don't have. They come from accuracy that pistols don't have. And they come from capacity, which, if the lefty-loos have their way, pistols won't have. So they're a compromise. It's so you can have something. Yeah. Question 2. Stopping power skeptic Steve. Question 2. I have situation. People swear a pump shotgun's racking sound alone will scruff any intruder, no shot needed. Does the simple sound of chambering around in the shotgun really make bad guys flee every time? Rack and scare Randy. No, and that question, or that statement, just pisses me off every time I hear it. No, because if there's 3 guys, they know that you're not going to be able to hit them all on the first try, and unless you're practicing your pump like crazy, practicing with your pump shotgun like crazy, you're not even going to be able to get a follow-up shot. And that's if you don't get a light primer strike or a short shucking, or just any Ringo stop, just any of the other million things that can happen. What I will say, and I've lightly skipped ahead, and I think one of the next questions gets into this, just from looking at a few of the words. Most people don't store with the round in the chamber simply because that's usually what makes storing your firearm dangerous. If there's like a cook-off from like a house fire, as rounds being in the chamber, because that gives them the velocity that they need to really become a problem. So in all likelihood, you are going to be having to pump your shotgun, racking it, making that noise. But I guarantee you, they're going to know exactly where you are the second you do that. And so you might actually be trying to do it as quietly as possible and really be regretting it. So there's a lot of mindset there of like, if that shotgun is near your bed, maybe it already has a round in the chamber and it's safe, but maybe unsafe. And then maybe if it's in your safe, there's no round in the chamber. Same thing with all your other pistols and stuff. We'll get into that later. But no, racking a slide. I will tell you, I think I've said this before. I did rack my slide out in the front yard once while the neighbor was outside playing with her baby, and her head whipped around so fast I felt really bad, and I never did that again. My brain wasn't even, like, I'm so used to just like racking the slide and holstering my pistol, before I go anywhere, because I store my pistols in the safe without a round in the chamber. Again, yeah, boy, I bet there was just a million things going through her head, and I felt really bad. I should have said sorry. Everybody knows what that sounds like, but if you've got a bunch of 0 IQ ferals coming through, the first guy might be wearing like a, a flak jacket or more, They might not give a shit. They might just be waiting for you to, blow your hot load on them and then overrunning you. So, no, I think it's insane. I get insanely frustrated when people bring that up. And if you want to issue them some kind of warning, you just say, hey, I'm in here and I have a loaded gun and I'm 911 and the cops are on the way, and hopefully you don't have family spread all out around your house and dogs and cats and goldfish. Say, hey, just get out of here. Don't come in this room. If you try to come through that door, you're going to get my hot lead on your face. I mean, and, all over your chest. You know what I mean? This episode's already going a weird direction, but you get the idea. And if you've got family in the house, you gotta have like no comms plans so your kids know what to do, or if they have their own danger rooms to go into, or, hop behind AR-500 on the other side of their bed or something. Plate. Yeah, anyway. No, I'd say these days, getting 911 on the phone might not even be possible because a lot of home invasions have cell phone jammers. And nobody's getting 911 out. Even your whole, if you're in apartments, like your whole entire set of apartments might not be getting any 911 out. People say that's Hollywood fantasy, but you're just being paranoid. But you are living in la la land if you think there's not 3 to 5 plus people. They've already been scouting your house. They've been putting hidden cameras outside your house. This happens all the time. Hidden trail cameras with Wi-Fi extenders and extended batteries. Yeah, like they already know what they want. They're already willing to commit the resources to get what they want. And I'll just have 2 dogs. No, dogs, 99% of dogs, unless they're extremely well trained, are effing useless in home invasions. Sorry, it's just reality. So I guess this episode could have just been home invasion stuff, because almost all of these look, kind of skipping ahead a little bit, almost all this looks like home invasion. Question 3. I have situation. I've seen claims that you should keep an empty chamber in your home defense gun for safety. Is carrying or storing with an empty chamber safer or smarter for quick use? Empty chamber Eddie. I used to think store everything with a round in the chamber in case you got to grab it. But people are saying that storing with a round in the chamber is a good way for accidents to happen. And also, like, if your safe is on fire, having rounds in the chamber is like really, 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 really bad. And oh, by the way, it's probably not a part of this, but fire ratings on safes, 99% of safes is not a real thing. That's a whole other deal. So carrying on you, have a round in the chamber. For your bedside gun, I'd keep a round in the chamber. Because again, I can't remember if it was like Vision's chat or whose chat, Marf's. I can't remember whose chat I was on yesterday, or Survival Living. I don't know, it was one of them. Like, people can get through a door so damn fast. If your front door and back door aren't set up like vaults, people are getting in that door in like 3 seconds, which means you've got to wake up from an absolute dead-ass sleep, have the dexterity to somehow deal with your firearm, and automatically know where all your loved ones are, in the span of like 5 seconds. Good luck, right? Good luck. Ringo, come on, get on your post. So I'd keep around in the chamber if it's your bed gun. or if it's your carry gun. Kids in the house is obviously a different story, but like the parents that have their like kids sleeping in their room and stuff and fiddle farting with their things, like that's on you. Okay, like, and also you can have bedside guns that have like the handprint thing, but again, if you don't have one that like opens in a second, like you're on borrowed time. Which is also like why I think in a lot of third world countries the bedroom door is set up like a vault too. But you might have your perimeter alarms turned on, but like the jammer's just going to knock it out. I mean, nobody's running hard lines anymore for their alarm systems, even though they should be. Question for Empty Chamber Eddie. I have situation. Everyone says AR-15s are ultra-powerful weapons of war that blow targets apart. Is the 223-556 round from a modern sporting rifle really that much more destructive than other common calibers? High-powered hyperbole, Hank. Certainly more powerful than 9mm. Certainly more powerful than, 22, obviously. But nowhere near as powerful as 7.62 by 39 or 7.62 by 51, aka like 308. And then it just gets bigger from there. I mean, most hunting rounds are 30 or were 30-06, which are bigger than 308 rounds. And not only do those blow a hole through everything, but they blow your ears out too if you're not wearing two sets of headset, ear pros. People I think are really surprised when they hold a 223-556 round. They're comparatively really, really, really small. I think when most people imagine a 223-556 round, they're imagining something closer to like 20 millimeter, which are massive, like effectively like a cannon round. I think they stopped considering them rifles after 50 cal. I think 20 millimeters after 50 cal. I don't know why that is, but those are like anti-aircraft rounds and ship like deck weapons and stuff. Like that's what most people think of, but even like 50 cal is like pretty big and does blow a hole through everything. And I still think some people think that like 223 is even bigger than that because of how the media is just blown it all out of proportion. AR-15s are not weapons of war. I think where a lot of people get confused is Sleepy Joe has said over and over and over again that, your AR-15 is useless because we have F-35s. I don't know, I can't remember who it was, but I just saw someone say that the other day again. Like that was repeated so many times. And it's like, because he would say things like, oh, you have your AR-15, we have F-35s or something, like talking down to the U.S. population. And I think what people are saying is like, well, okay, if AR-15s aren't a big deal, why don't you want us to have them? And they never had a really good response to that. So our founding fathers, at the writing of the Constitution and then the Second Amendment, we the people had exactly, if not better, arms than the military did at the time. I think people had rifled barrels before it was widely adopted. The private citizen, because they could just go buy whatever they wanted, right? So it's only in kind of more recent history that the military even had better stuff than private citizens. And I would still argue now in a lot of cases, if you have the money, you can have better night vision setups. You can have better armored vehicles for the most part. Like the first Iraq War, the beginning of the second Iraq War, they still didn't have armored Humvees. So private citizens still could have had more of an armored Humvee, and I think it was a private citizen that helped them build their new armored crow's nests, I think, for the Hummers, if I remember. So a weapon of war is not a real thing. It's just whatever modern defensive tool you think you need to defend yourself, which includes mortars and grenades and rocket launchers. And I think for a long time I used to think like explosives were kind of a different thing. I still think explosives are kind of a different thing. Well, what about your neighbors? Like, like, you want me to worry about the neighbors that are going to turn me in? I don't mean now, I mean like where I used to live. I mean, people can own actual cannons. Like, people can own tannerite. So, I don't know. Weapons of war is not a real thing. They're not ultra powerful. But what they are is impractical for things like apartments, where it's going to just be perforations in like every direction. But to be clear, 9mm is going to do that too. So if you have to defend yourself in an apartment, it's just going to be a mess no matter what you have to deal with. And that's something everybody kind of has to figure out for themselves. I don't know if we go into that later, but we'll see. I have situation. I keep reading that revolvers never jam and are 100% reliable while semi-autos fail constantly. Are revolvers truly foolproof compared to modern pistols, or is that an old school myth? There's this hilarious meme where people talk about how like rock solid revolvers are, but then they're like, stop playing with that revolver like a fidget toy. It's fragile. Stop slamming the cylinder home. You're going to break the pin. Revolvers are like a watch. They're like mechanical, like a watch. Everything in those things has to function perfectly and flawlessly for that cylinder to go, for that hammer to drop, for you to be able to decock it, right? Like, it all has to handle itself perfectly, right? Damn, the whole fucking gang is going down the road. That being said, modern pistols have been accused of being extremely fragile too, with people dry firing striker fire pistols and then the striker breaking, which is why it's usually a best practice for people to dry fire using snap caps, so you're not destroying the hammer. I don't know how true that is either, but no, revolvers are not more reliable. They're not more bulletproof, foolproof, bomb-proof. They can get crud in them just as much, if not more. But what they can do is, since they tend to be so stinking overbuilt, Ringo, is they can usually handle higher pressure cartridges easier. And in that regard, that's why like 44 mag, the Magnum 357 mag, that's why they tend to be in revolvers that can handle those higher pressures, whereas like modern pistols will get worn out faster unless they're seriously purpose-built for higher pressure cartridges. Revolver or bust, Rob. Question 6. I have situation. Some folks claim warning shots or shooting into the air ground will scare off threats without harming anyone. Is firing a warning shot safe and legally smart option in a defensive situation? Well, none of this is legal advice about anything. And also, again, going back to the, apartment thing, you're not going to shoot into the air or the ground because you could hit your neighbors. First of all, that's just common sense, and I lean on common sense more than like the legality of the whole thing. But from a legal standpoint, you're not even supposed to draw your weapon unless you plan on using it, and unless you need to use it, because you're going to have to go to court and say I was in fear for my life, blah, 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 and it needs to sound really sincere. And if it doesn't sound sincere, the court's going to hang you out to dry. While the mob outside is screaming that the jurors had better vote a certain way, otherwise hell's going to pay, and the jury's already been doxxed, and you weren't in fear for your life. It's going to make the jury's job, 12 people too stupid to get out of jury duty, a lot easier to convict you. Where there's kind of like a funny, not the funny haha, but like a weird squiggly gray area is if you have to draw your pistol and you're at the low ready, and then that diffuses the situation. Then there's all kinds of like crazy accusations. Oh, he was waving his pistol. He was doing this. He was doing that. It was unjustified. La-di-da. That's where you better have really good firearms insurance and a really good lawyer. And hopefully there's some video of it or something. But I can tell you what happened to me personally. I was going out to the car from a Costco with a bunch of groceries, and two guys were coming at me from two different angles. And I lifted my shirt up, and I was about to send them back to the spawn point. And the second I lifted my shirt up, they did a little hand signal to each other, or they decided to go somewhere else, and they completely turned around. Like they just yeeted their way out of there. That was insane. And it happened so fast, I didn't even think about it. I just did it. There was another time we were at, there's actually video of this floating around the internet. So I won't say too much about it. Suffice it to say, this guy started waving a gun outside of his car, and a bunch of us converged on him, and I didn't have my pistol out, but I had my jacket up, and it was ready to come out. And a lot of people said I should have fired. He wasn't quite aiming at me yet, which I know sounds kind of dumb, but it's weird. You kind of, everything happens in like 1 second, but it seems like a million years to you. And something in my head just said he's not gonna fire. Like they were gangbangers, and I think I couldn't, like, there was something the way he was doing it where it's like he's waving that just to troll everybody, because I've seen so many people wave their guns around as kind of like a dick measuring contest. And it wasn't like, hey, you guys stay away from my car. Although I think he was kind of stuck in the middle because he was already fighting and arguing with people. And instead of just driving, like, he had come there to start a problem. And I think he realized not only was he in over his head, but I think he realized he only had a revolver. And he skadooded on there. He would have been sent back to the spawn point too, because he didn't have an angle So I think even though it was slowly transitioning to I'm waving this gun around to show off, to like, oh, now I have this pistol and I need to defend myself. Oh, I now have this pistol and there's no way this pistol is going to be able to defend me. And the light turned, thank goodness, and he took off. So he didn't get sent back to the spawn point, but I would have. I had him to rights, and he had no angle on me, but he had angles on all my friends. And the person that I was supposed to be there to take care of was to my right, which means the person that I was taking care of was just fine. If that makes sense. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Anyway, so you start to see these things in like a millionth of a second. And I think the problem is like when you go back and explain that to a jury and then, well, where were you trained to do that? Who said it was okay to do that? And then you get some cop on the stand and the cop's like, that's not how we're going to do it. Even though, talking about the Strickland trial now, even though how a cop handles a situation has absolutely no bearing on how a private citizen has to handle a situation. They'll swear up and down. It's stupidity, this insane double standard, acting like cops are better trained than citizens when most cops like barely qualify every year. It's BS. Like, cops are undertrained. Massively undertrained unless they're on SWAT or take private training. So I've never had to draw, but I've been like a half a second away several times. Where a lot of people get in trouble with is they pretend like they're going to draw, don't have a pistol, which is, side note, very common outside of bars. There tended to be a lot of attacks at bars because they think you're not carrying at a bar, but I'm usually a designated driver. I've never drank in my life, and talk to the bartender and work something out. So thankfully I've never been jumped at a bar because they would have been very surprised. But I can't say the same for everybody else, and so getting jumped outside of bars was very common. I think where people get in the most trouble is not whether they should, fire around. It's whether they really need to or not. And a lot of Second Amendment stuff gets a bad rap because there are people running around with murder boners that are just, wishing a mother effer would. And it's just like, that's just the wrong mindset. It's just absolute insanity. But then the other side goes, well, that's why nobody should have guns. It's like, sure, disarming the entire population, including grandma, because there's a couple people running around with murder boners. Never mind that the bad guys are the same way. They're looking at someone who literally looks at them the wrong way. And they're everywhere, too. So, I don't know. So, fire a warning shot? No, not in a million years. By the time you pull that trigger, you'd better be ready to throw your entire life away for whatever it was you had to pull that trigger. Warning shot, Wally. Question 7. I have situation. I've heard that spray and pray full auto fire is the ultimate for home defense. I don't think you have, AI. Is fully automatic fire actually useful or recommended for civilian self-defense? Full auto fantasy, Fred. No. I don't think I've ever heard that. This sounds like the AI hallucinating its balls off. Question 8. I have situation. People say you need thousands of rounds stored or you won't have enough when things get bad. Is hoarding massive amounts of ammunition essential for a beginner prepper? Thousands of rounds is rookie numbers. I've talked about this before, but probably not in a long time. You should have 10,000 rounds per firearm that you actually plan on using per person, and you need, what do they say, like a third of that in mags or something, which is like impractical these days, especially depending on what you're talking about. But like when PMags for ARs would go on sale, like you could get those for like $6-7 a piece for like reliable PMags. So, you know, it's not uncommon. 10,000 is the minimum, but like I think it was more common for people to have about like 30,000 rounds, between 30,000 and 100,000 rounds of 9mm and 223 5.56, because you can go to a class and like spend between like 3,000 and 5,000 rounds, like 2-3 day class. I know that sounds just like absolutely like maniacal fantasy barbarism to people, but it's really not. 3,000 to 5,000 rounds is a weekend. So yeah, 10,000. You should start with 10,000, and that doesn't mean 10,000. You know, crappy comm block ammo. You know, that's mil spec or better ammo that you know has been going through proper QA, like Phoenix on Twitter, Phoenix Ammo. I made the mistake, you know, of finding good prices and realizing that they just did no QA for other places. I won't say their names, but like Phoenix does like proper QA on their ammo. And do you pay a couple extra cents? Yeah, but you support American businesses. You know exactly who's making it. You know exactly where it's being made. And you know that there's just amazing QA being done on your ammo. Hoarding, yeah, but no, 10K is not hoarding. 10K is not a massive amount. Yeah, the news is going to make you look like some kind of maniacal psychopath, but if you're training properly, you're buying ammo in by the case at 1,000 rounds per box. So, yeah. Ammo hoarder anxiety, Anna. What's the opposite of that? Buying a revolver and never having shot it and only having 50 rounds? It's not smart when there's a horde going down your street of 0 IQ ferals that don't care. Question 9. I have situation. I keep seeing stories that most gunfights happen at super long ranges, so you need a rifle with optics. Are typical self-defense encounters really at distances that demand long-range capability? Double doubting Dave. Wait. Distance doubting Dave. That's weird. I don't know if the AI is hallucinating again. It's usually the opposite. It's like most CQBs, like, you know, under 25 yards. You still need... You still need to be able to hit someone with, you know, reliably hit your target, the bad guy, you know, at 25 yards. But no, you're not going to be... You're not going to, like... Even in, like, a rural area, you're really not hitting those distances. You're not going to be like on a hill doing 400 yards at like the next hill over. That's what your DMR, you know, your designated marksman might be doing that like once in a blue moon, but in SHTF. But no, with your rifle, like most people zero at 25 and 100. Just hitting, like just look around your house, or go your yard. Like, can you even see further than 25 yards out? Like most people can't, especially if you're in urban and suburban areas. Like, there's too much fences and trees and crap. You're just not seeing that far. Not to be, glib about it, but most time when people seeing gunfights happening at super long ranges, it's because they're watching Ukraine footage of people in one tree line attacking people out in the other tree line with like giant no man's land in the middle. If we get that far out, yeah, you're gonna want a rifle and optic and stuff, a rifle with an optic, but people have a really hard time. Like, should you be able to hit that far? Yeah. Are you ever gonna probably be hitting that far? Like, maybe way into like SHTF. We're talking like way, when you've got a roadblock and you're sitting at the roadblock from like, a hiding position way further, or if you're hunting and the deer with Kevlar are running around. Should you be able to? Yeah. Are you going to have to? Probably not. Question 10. I have situation. Some claim that just owning or showing a gun will make attackers back down without firing. Does brandishing or open carry alone reliably de-escalate most threats? Brandish and bully Brenda. Reliably de-escalate? No. Could it de-escalate? Yes. Are you going to get hung out to dry anyway? Probably. Because people are going to, once they see it, they're going to embellish it. I don't like open carry, but I think there's places where if you're not open carrying, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Open carry kind of works really well if everybody's open carrying. If nobody's open carrying, it doesn't work very well. It's kind of not even as much of a deterrent as it is part of a uniform, like police and stuff. And I'll say, if somebody's methed out of their mind, they don't they don't care at all. If you're open carrying, and you can have a rocket launcher on you and they're still going to come at you with a machete, and you don't know if they're trying to scare you away or if they want to lop you into pieces. There's so many stabbings and hammer, claw hammer attacks and machete attacks. And I am no closer at all, for any rhyme or reason, why some guy, they caught the guy, by the way, but he was running around the other day stabbing people in the neck. That doesn't strike me as like territorial. The dude was unglued. Somehow they finally caught him. You might say it could have been racially motivated, but they won't release the victims' identities. So it's hard to compartmentalize why people are attacking people. They're off their meds, they're this, they're that, they're seeing things. A lot of the time they're just territorial, so you can just kind of figure out what their territory is and scoot around it. And so a lot of times, when you're being chased by somebody with a machete, they're not trying to hack you up. They're trying to get you out of their territory. Hold on. All right, where were we? That was the hot water tank alarm started going off. Welcome back. Thank you. Okay. Where were we? Yeah, showing guns will make attackers back down, brandishing open carry. I have been in rural areas where everybody open carries, and then they do look at you really weird. And I pulled my shirt over my pistol, so my pistol was sticking out, like the grip was sticking out, and then they looked and they're like, oh, okay. And then I was like, cool again. I was okay with them again. That was if you're not carrying a pistol in some areas, you are definitely not trusted. If they can't see your pistol, they assume you don't have one, and then they start assuming things. So that was a crazy noise. It's like a big explosion just went off. Anyway, yeah. So the bonus question. I have situation. So much firearm talk, both pro and anti, seems driven by movie tropes, internet memes, and exaggerated stories, making it hard for newbies to know what's practical versus dramatic fantasy. Oh, you mean like, shotguns sending people through a wall? Is the biggest myth about guns for prepping and defense that they're either magical instant win tools or uncontrollable death machines? Hell yeah. When in reality, responsible training, common sense, and realistic expectations make them safe and effective for ordinary people. Hollywood versus reality, Ray. I've talked about the SIG P320/M17 on the channel before. That certainly did not help things. And even though that all got brushed under the rug as soon as the thing with the Air Force went away, and SIG is never going to disclose what they found in their review of all the Air Force pistols. And I think the people embroiled in that case all were unalived or disappeared, and so I don't think we'll ever really know what happened. But, there was a lot of really strong engineering, independent YouTube sleuths that I think found out how the 320/M17 thing could have totally happened. Flashlight, or, weapon mounted light, plus tons of rounds through it, plus jamming it in a holster seems to make those things very dangerous. And SIG, I think, is just going to hope it all goes away again so they can move on to their other contracts, and it doesn't help that, True Lies has a famous scene where, so like a MAC-10 or, goes flying down the stairs and shoots everybody, shoots the bad guys. I think that there's proven designs that are very safe mechanically, and then there's been a lot of duds. People that make their triggers way too heavy, people that make the firing mechanisms like too wonky to where there's not, enough like surface area for everything to be holding on to everything, and certain mechanical parts can circumvent internal systems that they shouldn't be able to, things like that. Whereas like the Springfield Echelon has like a great record, the 365 has a pretty good record, Glock has a pretty good record, and so I wouldn't even say like movie tropes. Yeah, internet memes, like I think these days almost internet memes do more damage because everyone just thinks her, dump on the SIG, 320/M17, and it's like, if people would stop effing around instead of just memeing something for years and years and years and years and years and years, and then turning right around and selling discount codes for those exact same pistols for years and years and years and years. It's not the pistol anymore. It's the gun community just being clowns and not holding SIG responsible and not holding themselves responsible. And then you get, the fact that they, a lot of them are Glock fanboys, and it's just it just muddies the water. And movies have, are just really no better. Like 99% of Hollywood are anti-gun or raging liberals with armed security, and MP5s and shit. And it's like they'll have like, they'll have guns in their mansions that get stolen, and they have panic rooms, and they have their own security, and politicians are no better. There was a politician, I want to say it was New York, running her mouth about how she had a gun. And then everyone's like, wait, what the heck? And they fact checked it, and sure enough, she did have one, and she had it, like, it wasn't legal in the state that she had it in. Like, the elitists want to disarm everybody, so only they're the ones armed. They want to have a monopoly on force, and they want to have a monopoly on violence. Meanwhile, and the news doesn't help either, because the gangs are running around with what I call full-auto Glockazines, with 30-round mags, full-auto Glocks, and it's okay apparently for them to have them, but the rest of us can't. The ATF would be at our houses so fast, but the gangs, no problem. Drug dealers, they have their own pill presses and their own full autos and their own 3D printing, and it's okay for them somehow just because they're ungovernable, that they can have all the self-defense stuff that they want. But you try to show somebody something and they see it's black and they immediately go, that's illegal. And it's just like, why? How? And like, yeah, I was that way too when I was like 6, but I grew up and realized, not everything that's loosely, patterned on, an M4 platform. It's just, it's frustrating. And that's why, like, pro 2A people, the gun culture, have to be good stewards. And a lot of that means if you bring a gal to the gun store, letting the gun store owner do their job and not being a dick, and tell them what you think they need. If you bring them to the range, letting them shoot a 22 first or a 380 first, because you got to overcome that fear and that flinching and the recoil impulse, and explaining to them that, like, a revolver is okay, but manipulating a modern pistol is not any different. And if they have arthritis, getting them a pistol where they can, manipulate the slide, so that grandma can defend herself from the horde of zero IQ ferals. The training and the tactics around it is, having a range day that's only gals. Having someone train the gals that's not their husband or boyfriend, especially if their husband or boyfriend's a effing moron. When I've trained people in the past, I can't tell you how many times, if their parents were there, I had to tell their parents to shut up. If their significant other was there, having to tell their significant other to shut up. When you're training somebody, especially in firearms, it's like yelling at a dog. A bunch of people will yell at the dog. The dog can't function. They just melt down, and then they've had a bad experience and they don't want to touch a pistol ever again. Most rational-ish people who are anti-gunners are actually anti-gunners because the wrong person took them to the range, or someone was being stupid with a gun around them at an early age, or they just don't want to take responsibility and they would rather die than defend themselves and their loved ones. And some of those things you can't reason with, but in a grid down shit is the fan situation, basically everybody on the homestead is going to have to be armed unless they're too young to understand too young to understand. But that doesn't mean you can't still get them, noise making materials and stuff. Like there can be other things that the kiddos can do, and having safe rooms for them and stuff. Like AR-500 is pretty affordable armor plating. It's just the way the anti-gun lobby has formed itself against magazines and against modern pistols and modern firearms in the US, let alone what's happened in Australia and the UK. You got to understand that this isn't about 10,000 rounds of ammo. It's not about a scary black pistol. They do not want people to be able to defend themselves, period. And there's no greater evidence of that than in the UK, where gals can't even have pepper spray, and they tell people, use this spray or that spray or this spray or that spray instead, and you go in just 10 seconds of research and you see all those sprays are a fraction of a hundredth of the effectiveness of just entry-level cans of modern pepper spray. So they don't want gals to be able to defend themselves, right? Unpopular opinion, and the opinion I think of a lot of people used to bring rifles to school all the time, and there used to be shooting clubs in school, after school and stuff. There used to be gun racks in trucks. That wasn't that long ago. It's in just a few short years, we've been extremely, extremely, extremely disarmed. And this is by design, and within another generation or two at this rate, the Second Amendment's going to be done in most of the US, and moving to another state doesn't fix it. So, because every town is called every town for a reason. How the Californians infested Washington and Oregon is exactly how they're going to infest Idaho, Utah, Colorado, Nevada. There's enough people in California, there's enough liberals in California to flip the western half of the United States with how strategically they're moving around. So there's going to have to be people coming back to the Second Amendment and realizing that modern rifles and modern pistols are necessary for every able-bodied person to be able to defend themselves against all enemies, foreign and domestic, because the country's completely overran. And so I hope this somehow reaches somebody that's on the fence or something, to just understand that we're only another Pulse nightclub, or another how many schools where they tell the cops to just not go in. They want us disarmed at every single place that gets attacked, schools and bars and stuff, and people shouldn't have guns in bars. Well, not everybody in the bar drinks. You know, like, you can have like a trained, calm, polite society, and if people can't behave in society, then they should be in jail, and if they can't be rehabilitated, they need to go back to the spawn point. And if people knew like the real crime statistics, if they knew how bad it was, they would go get training. And I don't mean the stupid little laser things and the little VR things and this and that, all that cutesy stuff and airsoft and paintball. I mean, like, go get real training. And then after you train, you practice. And I was hoping this one was going to get into a little bit more, but that means having a modern pistol, and that means having a modern rifle. And it means having enough mags and ammo for both per person in your house that you expect to be able to be defending themselves. Because even if you're in like a red or even a purple state, do not take for granted that they can't ban the sale of new modern firearms like tomorrow, because that's what happened here. They banned first, and then it's fought out in the courts for years, and that's what's happened in Oregon too. I never in a million years believed that when they banned the sale of the AR-15 style rifles, that they weren't going to also ban all the M1A style rifles too. It was like, I thought we were going to have M1As for like a long time. But sometimes they overreach a lot and act like they're going to compromise, and sometimes they actually get what they want. And no amount of legal jujitsu puts the cow back in the pasture. I know this one's ended up being like a really long after rant, but I know this episode was all over the board with me being silly at first and then being serious at the end, but I could just talk about this for hours. You know, like, don't even like the most basic rule, like, you know what your target is, and you know what's behind your target. And even that, just like that fundamental rule, you know, applies to doors and windows and walls and cars. And once your brain is kind of like wired to start seeing every area as like a potential self-defense scenario and exits and entrances and stuff, like, and you start to role play, you know, in your church, you know, start to role play in your favorite corner store, you know, while your buddy's working and it's late at night and nobody's in the store, and you start working out scenarios and realizing, like, especially gas stations, and just realize, like, if everybody trained and everybody practiced and we had an armed, polite society where everyone had the, like, kind of the mental maturity to understand, like, what reality is like. And when you've got, you know, armed brothers to your left and right, and everyone's trained together and everyone's on the same page together, this almost this euphoria, not that you're like invincible, because far from it, but you're just, you have a confidence that I just can't describe. Again, when things were really, really bad in 2015, 2016 through like 2022, I can't tell you how many like no-win scenarios we were walking in and out of. Not that you should be looking for a problem, but the problems were there everywhere. And I guess I'll wrap up with this. I was in a corner store, and three huge people from a certain ethnicity that were not from there were up for looking for riots. And they were surrounding me on 3 sides and had me up against a wall. And I was cool as a cucumber, and their little hood rat was running around instigating things. And I stood there cool as a cucumber, and they could have just completely done whatever they wanted, but what they didn't know, and I've told this story before, what they didn't know is that my friend had an AK behind the counter. And people don't understand when they go to Washington and Oregon. I saw a lot of people on Twitter talking about this earlier, like, the rest of the United States does not understand Washington and Oregon. We are like forged from we're forged from something else than most of the rest of the country. We've been tested over and over and over and over and over again, and we're still here. There isn't very much that hasn't been thrown at us at this point, and we're still here. They've banned the sale of new magazines. They've banned all modern rifles. One of these days they're going to try to ban modern pistols, the sale of new ones, and then they're going to try to confiscate them all, and it's not going to matter. We're all still going to be here. They're trying to absolutely tax us to death. You got to understand, like, wherever it is that you live, even if you're a suburban or rural area, or you could be the reddest state, do you think Ted Cruz, or do you think Ron DeSantis or whatever, you think that they actually give a shit about your Second Amendment rights? Ted Cruz can't stop talking, and I think DeSantis both can't stop talking about stupid college sports ball. Like, they don't give a shit about the Second Amendment. They're not Second Amendment purists. One of these questions talked about full auto earlier. Like, nobody even talks about full auto because it's like nobody wants to mag dump. It's just not. It's not a thing you do for personal defense. It's what you do to get, fire superiority, so you can do an L shape on, or J-hook somebody, or for a counter ambush, or so you can break contact and people aren't carrying enough mags on them to be able to do things like that. It's just not, unless you've got 3 to 5 guys that are coming at your house, but even then, a 30 round mag is like 3 to 5 seconds of fire, and so you're talking about 50 or 100 round PMags, or not PMags, drum mags. I can't remember who makes those now, because I think those big drum mags got wiped out a while back. So unless you've got one of those big drum mags, like, you've got to understand, if there's anything left that you take from any of this at all, is that don't let people tell you what you should be able to have to defend yourself. Our founding fathers knew it, and everybody up until a generation ago, boomers, knew that. And it wasn't until the 20s, where I guess that's not the boomers' fault. I forgot what that name of that generation was, but they didn't like Tommy guns, and they tried to ban alcohol, which is just stupid. Then they've just been taking away our Second Amendment rights for damn near 100 years now, and we've almost got none left. And this is just a really long-winded way of saying, get trained. Real reputable training. Go to a gun store. Don't listen to your idiot friend that you brought with you. Let the gun store owner find the right fit for you, And if you don't like what they're saying, or if things seem weird, find a gun store that resonates with you, and that make sure the things that they're saying make sense, because they're like trying to find something that's going to fit you perfectly, because they want you to like it and keep it and carry it, and it be an extension of you and save your life. And so for us, an example of that was me thinking that I needed my first subcompact, or compact, chambered in 45, but have my, wife have like a micro pistol, like chambered in 9 and stuff. And it was just like, he's like, you guys need to get a common caliber. And I used to talk about like, double action only. He's like, nobody does double action. Like, he was sitting there kind of like debunking those myths for me. Does that make sense? But he didn't want to make me look dumb in front of my wife, which was cool. But like, that dude was just amazing. And I regret so much that I didn't hang out with him more. And I don't know, I'm assuming he moved. But one day the cops were even acting crazy outside, and he walked me to my car with my paperwork and pistol and everything, which was like super, super effing cool. Made sure the cops didn't give us any shit, and he kept an eye on them the whole time, because the cops in that county were acting so weird. So damn weird. And they were right outside his gun. It was just really, I didn't like it. He didn't like it. Neither of us liked it. And it's like, when you like meet a real gun store owner that like really has your back, let them, let them find the right fit for you. They ask you a bunch of questions and they'll find the right fit for you, and make sure you get the mags and make sure you get the ammo. They'll take care of you, and it shouldn't be this big taboo thing. Anyway, I've rambled way too long, but this is a big deal to me. I've had to very nearly defend myself with my sidearm, unfortunately, just like way too many times, because things in the Pacific Northwest and the I-5 corridor just keep getting like worse and worse and worse. And people are going to look at you a certain kind of way sometimes, and it's just not a big deal. You just ignore them. You don't start nothing, there won't be nothing. And it's because, by and large, so many people here are armed that nobody messes with anybody. And it's just kind of, I don't know, an armed, polite society. And then the people that aren't from here, or the people that are just methed out of their minds, they don't get it. And then those are kind of the edge cases that you train and practice for, people that are going to want to hurt your church, or people that are going to want to hurt your family. I don't know. This is a really long ramble, and we're not doing, this is a top 10 bonus time, because I wanted to have like some real talk at the end of this one, because I know I was being a little silly at the beginning. For the 4 people that watch these, even if you just nod your head and don't even ever comment, just the fact that you're listening, I know Australia and Canada are both struggling with this right now. Just don't ever give up the ability to defend yourself, because we have imported the third world, and they have a monopoly on violence, unfortunately. 0 IQ ferals that know nothing but violence. And Australia and Canada, you don't want to become the next UK. Anyway, take care, and appreciate y'all, and, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. there's still time to prep and ask me questions down in the comments, and I'll answer them as best as I can, and we'll make it through this together, and talk to y'all later. Bye.
One in the head, move to the next, the mob wants you dead. They don't care whether it's your fault or not. They convict everyone at once.